Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday. We made it to another Friday. You know, gateway to chaos. Donald Trump has the jet standing by, warmed up and standing by, ready to take him down to Florida, even though we're going to have like a 70, 80 degree weekend right here. But as you know, he keeps all his weirdo gimps and sex slaves in the dungeons at Pervalago, at least for now. So, and maybe that's where all the medical treatment is. And they got to relocate it here to the Virginia course and get more pan stick to cover up his hand injuries and resupply for the spring season, which only lasts a little while before he departs to New Jersey every weekend instead. I think I did see somewhere that one of the people who tracks this stuff has said that he's about 5 or 10 days away, and I guess this weekend will take care of some of that, from spending a full 365 days of his term in office, this one and the last one together, at his golf clubs. So that's nice. You know, if you get 8 years as president and you can take one, or even by the time this is all over, 2 of those entire years off at the golf course, well, that makes 2 terms of service that much more survivable, even for a very old person, the oldest ever to be elected to the office. So that's unfortunate. And for those of you tuning in to find out whether the president slipped on a banana peel and fell down a flight of stairs, as I think I saw somebody saying, I wake up every morning looking for that. It wasn't me. I didn't say it, but I did feel the same way. But they had a whole litany of things. Slipping on a banana peel, falling on 18 flights of stairs, through a plate glass window. I would add into an alligator pit. That is one of my favorites. Wood chippers sometimes enter into the calculation, but it's all just speculation, though it would be, you know, at this point, foolish not to speculate. Irresponsible, in fact, not to speculate. Okay, lots to catch up on. We're in the same Friday bind as always. Lots of stories that should have gotten airtime and haven't, and I'm not sure how to connect to all of them, but they don't have to be connected. I can just blurt them out. Plus, lots of stories that are weird and a little bit esoteric and maybe a little bit out of our usual political focus, but are nonetheless important and interesting context. We better get right to it. All right. It being Friday the 20th, I will remind you that this time next week, I guess we'll be gearing up for the next round of No Kings protests. So we do have that on tap. And as I mentioned to you earlier in the week and played for you a little bit, we can just play this right in the background. We can talk over it a little bit. But Ronnie Cantor, who sent us this beautiful and haunting folk rendition, there's another rendition. I would ask you, where is your heart when the people are calling for love? As I mentioned to you earlier, I'll comment over it just quietly. But this is something that he was hoping people would be thinking about him playing at the No Kings protest, perhaps. Inside, this is a call to action, a call to your heart, to try to pull together and not be pulled apart. I would ask you, what do you do? Are you false in your actions or true? I told you last time he had written this during the first administration. It was equally applicable then. Your children come and ask you, did you help or turn away? This is a call to action, a call to your heart, a call to together and not be pulled apart. This is a call to passion, a call to unite, a song we sing together to fill our souls with a light for whoever you are and whatever you do. The time has come to listen, it's time to follow through. For wherever you are and wherever you've been, you understand the trouble we are in. You understand the trouble we are in. It's the man and the woman, the gay and the straight, the people with religion and those who find their own way.
left behind. This is a call to action, a call to your heart. We'll try to pull together and not be pulled apart. This is a call to passion, a call to unite, a song we sing together that fills our soul with light. It's the peaceful and the hate-filled, the soldier and the priest, the one who has the very most and those who have the least. It's the wise man and the fool, the rich man and the poor, the one who's always satisfied, the one who must have more and more and more. It's the Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu, the Christian and the Jew. It's the yellow, black, white, brown and red. It's everyone, it's you. This is a call to action, a call to your heart, to pull as one together and not be pulled apart. It's the universal message that cannot be denied, a universal message that we all hold deep inside. For whoever you are and wherever you do, the time has come to listen, it's time to follow through. For whoever you are and whatever you've done, you understand, together we are one. I would ask you, where is your heart when the people are calling for love?
Thank you again, Ronnie Cantor with I Would Ask You, and a poignant anthem for No King's Day, certainly well before, as we said, written well before then in the first administration, but that much more poignant, especially this whole, the idea of pulling together, more poignant than ever during the era of ICE and border patrol raids in our cities and arresting people left and right, disappearing them from the face of the earth, people dying in custody. Any number of such stories today, and they continue to mount. People, I think, who've been tracking this, saying that people are reported to have died in ICE custody just one at the rate of about one every 4 days or so. They really have gotten no handle on this whatsoever. And in the meantime, looking for a new head of the Department of Homeland Security who turns out to be a weirdo, a bit of a violence fetishist, a fabulist, and resume-inflating liar. And maybe just not the right person for the job. But the nomination moves forward nonetheless. We'll see how quickly that's tracked to the floor. Lots of shenanigans going on the Senate floor. And it's a great time for procedure stories, but we're going to have to wait until there's more digestion of exactly what's going on. But it sounds like the Democratic leadership has figured out a way to get a privileged motion in that can disrupt the current ongoing debate on the SAVE Act in compliance with President Trump's demands that this thing be passed and put on his desk, and he won't sign any other legislation until it is. But at the same time, I need you to also give me $200 billion for the war. And also, by the way, never mind the fact that this voter suppression bill has also got to somehow contain a clause about no men and women's sports, making zero sense whatsoever. No surprise to anyone. But also, let me conduct the war from the golf course. He's not paying any attention to any of these things in particular. But I think they've engineered a methodology of with motions to refer and motions to recommit certain bills to the Rules Committee in the Senate, and that apparently such motions, if reported out, if reported back out from the Rules Committee, take precedence over pending business when they are motions to reconsider previous Senate action on House messages and House messaged bills. It's quite convoluted. But perhaps by Monday we can sort that. I should probably anticipate getting questions about that from Greg, and we'll sort it all out. It's not entirely. It doesn't make itself easy to understand and clear, and it's a rarely used procedure. We'll see if I can't digest it and maybe give you a hint on it later on. Ringwis is covering the situation the best he can from the other side of the Atlantic. And you can grasp it, but you wonder why it hasn't been done more frequently in the past. But then again, we've never had anybody just totally derail all legislation or claim to be derailing all legislation. All right. Other things I need to get to. Here's something that is a departure. Well, maybe I'll save this for later. Something that's a departure from our regular fare, but that I think definitely needs to be shoehorned in. But let's make some other news that we can shoehorn things into, so that later when we change directions, we'll know what direction we were changing from. We could do that right now. It's a BS excuse. In the courts, news from the Hill, and I think I feel like there's more in here, but now there's a similar story, so I guess we'll weave these two things together. Are you ready for this one? All right. The Hill reports, let me open up their page so we can get the byline correct. Rebecca Beitsch, Beitsch. We never really have figured that one out, but that's my best and most non-offensive guess. It's all offensive to her if you're talking about her own surname. Comey subpoenaed in 2016 election probe in Florida. They just can't get enough of trying to indict James Comey. They couldn't make it happen with Lindsay, what's her name? I've already forgotten her name. I think that's good. I blanked her name out. Who never really was a U.S. attorney here in the Eastern District of Virginia. I'm pretty sure they'll mention her name. Halligan, wasn't that it? And I guess they've moved this thing to Florida. I would not be surprised if they had taken it to, the Southern District of Florida. And does that include Aileen Cannon's district? I think she's probably Southern District of Florida. Will they magically draw Aileen Cannon and all of this? Depends on which courthouse they decide to file in, I guess. Federal prosecutors in Florida have subpoenaed former FBI Director James Comey again, this time as part of a wide-ranging probe into a prior investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election. Long story short on that one, they are investigating the investigation of Donald Trump's 2016 campaign so that they can find out who, in their view, falsely accused the Trump campaign of collusion or some kind of contact or whatever kind of label you want to hang on it with the Russian government and facilitating or accepting Russian interference in the 2016 election. And if you thought that was possible and you looked into it, that's a crime in their view. Of course, that stands everything on its head. But remember, this is about prosecuting Trump's enemies and political rivals, which I believe at the end of last week, or maybe must have been at the beginning of this week, because I think I read it over the weekend, when we learned that, what was his name? John Lauro, one of the attorneys working, one of the few attorneys left working inside of the Trump Justice Department and a former personal lawyer of Trump's, going to the American Bar Association conference and explaining to all you dummies who don't understand the rule of law and the Constitution in exile that this was all on the up and up, because after all, things were much better in the Department of Justice now than they were during the Biden era. And the proof of that is, under Biden, the DOJ was prosecuting Joe Biden's top political rivals. Whereas in the Donald Trump administration, you don't see the top political rivals to Donald Trump being prosecuted, do you? Yes, you do. You see them being indicted in every jurisdiction they can imagine, and then having all the charges thrown out and grand juries refusing to return true bills of indictment, cases being thrown out because there's no legally appointed prosecutor, cases being thrown out because there's no crime being charged here. It's happening all over the place, and they just charge him over and over and over again anyway and try to figure out some other way to harass people. I guess you could say it's true that you don't see his top rivals being prosecuted because it never gets to the prosecution stage. They're trying to indict them. They can't make it work. And of course, I'm sure they would say, well, James Comey isn't a political rival to Donald Trump. He's not running for president. Well, nobody's running for president yet. So, that's just going to be a null set anyway. But, yeah, that, of course, prompted Laura's former law partner, who was moderating the panel at the ABA, to simply say, essentially say, what the hell's wrong with your brain, man? What happened to you? How did this sickness spread to you? I thought you used to understand the law. And now you don't. All right. So the news is that the federal prosecutors in Florida have subpoenaed former FBI Director James Comey as part of this wide-ranging probe of investigating the investigation of the investigators, etc. News Nation. I think I've mentioned them a couple of times, and I've seen some of their clips online and thought, should I lump them in with One American News and the rest? And I have, just because their content seemed to fit the bill. But as it turns out, and I don't think we're wrong in our assessment of this, but you should know, as they disclose here, News Nation is The Hill's sister network, which, just reminds us that even though we end up reading The Hill a lot, The Hill as a publication and some of the opinion pieces that they publish are outlandish and ridiculous, and should keep in mind that it is a right-wing ownership, even though a lot of times the news reports, as I read them, are, if not fairly neutral, easily enough debunked and dissected that we can still make good use of them on this show. But News Nation, which is the Hill's sister network, confirmed Comey was subpoenaed in the probe, which is also reviewing the previous investigations into President Trump, including the work of Obama-era intelligence officials. They do say also reviewing that, as though there was anything else being reviewed in this probe. And I guess it could be anything. They might be reviewing men and women's sports, for instance. I demand you do that. So Axios was the first to report this news. Not that I have the Axios article handy. Neither an attorney for Comey nor the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida responded to a request for comment. If indeed there is a U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Florida, you can never be sure. It's unclear exactly what information prosecutors might be seeking from Comey, and in fact, probably none. They just want to be able to report that he's being investigated. However, the Trump critic, who used to direct the FBI, was previously charged in connection with making false statements to Congress by another Trump-appointed U.S. attorney in Virginia, except no, she wasn't Trump-appointed, and she wasn't the United States attorney in Virginia either. You know that story. That's Lindsay Halligan. That case was dismissed by a judge, however, who determined President Trump improperly appointed Lindsay Halligan shortly after her predecessor resigned over concerns with the case. Comey had also sought to have the case dismissed, arguing he did not lie during testimony with lawmakers. So lots of grounds for having that dismissed. But it is interesting how you have to frame things this way. And we have that normalcy bias in our reporting. He was just, he was previously charged by another Trump-appointed U.S. attorney who wasn't appointed by Trump, or a U.S. attorney, essentially, is what they're saying. But they get a long way around to it. The probe in Florida has sought information from several former officials. Both NBC and CBS are reporting that at least 130 subpoenas have been issued since the investigation began last year. So this is a wide-ranging and long-running one. That group includes a number of those previously targeted by Trump, if you can believe it, including former CIA Director John Brennan, former FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, former FBI employees Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. I hate those guys. Who had texted about Trump during the 2016 investigation, were also subpoenaed. All right, just so you know, they are not giving up, and they'll never stop, and it doesn't matter to them that they keep getting nothing out of it and are batting zero, like Jeanine Pirro, which rhymes. I offered that up, by the way, for you're welcome, Colin Jost. You can take that one for the weekend update, right? Pirro has lost another round of attempts to indict, and I forget exactly who it was that she was trying to indict last time, though I can probably look it up pretty easily. But basically, once again, brought charges to a grand jury. Grand jury said, nothing doing. It's not a crime, what you're talking about. You're crazy, drunk, what have you. And, the line being, by the way, if you're keeping score at home, how many of the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia's attempts to indict Donald Trump's political opponents have been successful? Here's a hint. The answer rhymes with Pirro. It's very easy to remember. All right. I don't know. The first time I said it, I was like, that was Colin Jost's voice. All right. There's more in... as a matter of fact, here is... I guess it must probably be the related story. I found the Pirro thing, or at least a mention of Pirro, this time from Bloomberg News. And I think we made some mention of it on the air when Greg mentioned Jerome Powell. I think we played an audio clip of Powell yesterday. DOJ and the White House clear the way for Pirro to keep the Powell probe going. I think the news that prompted the joke was, once again, the case against Powell thrown out. Basically, it came down to this. The grand jury could find no crime in the charge. And remember, Pirro is charging him with, he isn't listening to Donald Trump, and he's not raising interest rates, but also there's huge cost overruns at the Fed's new building. And the grand jury properly said, those sound like complaints, but not criminal charges. Sorry, no dice and no bill. And yet, the news story, the reaction a couple days later is the DOJ and the White House are saying, don't worry, keep going. The courts have said, no, stop, but they say, go ahead. All right, the Bloomberg reporter, can I even see it from what they show me on the paywalled page? No, they can't. We'll take their word for it in Instapaper that it is Chris Strom, Josh Wingrove, and Joshua Green. Although, I don't know. There's also a mention of a Saleha Mohsin up top. All of the metadata gets scrambled in the Instapaper view. Anyway, the news is supposed to be correct. Top leaders at the Justice Department, if there are any, are rallying behind a U.S. attorney's efforts. I guess she is a U.S. attorney, but she shouldn't be. Her efforts to investigate Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, and the White House isn't opposing it, amping up the clash with major implications for who will lead the central bank. And remember, as I recall, his term does end in May, and so there will be someone else soon. They can just wait it out, really. President Donald Trump had been open to the idea of dropping the probe into Powell until last Friday, when a judge rejected subpoenas issued to the central bank, according to people familiar with the matter. That is interesting. And let me see if it looks like I might have to try to find a different way to get at the rest of this story to see if there's any, logic behind the idea that you could keep going. It is interesting, though, that one note that Trump was originally not opposed to simply dropping the whole thing. And then when they was officially told, well, in fact, you have to drop the whole thing because there's no case there, then he's, got his back up. No. Now we have to continue. All right. Let's see. In fact, this version of the article says we got all of the byline names correct on it. All of them work together on that. So good news. So let's see. Trump had been open to the idea of dropping the probe until a judge ended up rejecting all the subpoenas issued to the central bank. Trump, angered by the ruling and harboring a longstanding belief that the courts are stacked against him, despite having named, 200 and something federal judges in his first term and continuing to run through them on his second. They're stacked against him except for all the ones that he appoints and all the ones that he appoints that rule against him. I think that's what really bothers him. He is now believed by aides and allies to support a push to appeal, said the people who requested anonymity to discuss private talks. So that ought to be interesting. Appealing what exactly? I guess in this case, the judge's decision to reject the subpoenas. That's going to make for an interesting appeal. I don't know how far that goes. Okay. Moments after the subpoenas were blocked last week, U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced that she would appeal the court's decision. Most everything is going to get read this way so she can understand it. Trump has not publicly weighed in on Pirro's move, but some of his aides were surprised by it. Justice Department leaders are backing Pirro and bringing her straws to drink wine juice boxes, according to a person familiar with the matter. The officials see the appeal as necessary to defend the integrity of investigations by prosecutors, said the person, who asked to remain anonymous to discuss internal deliberations. You get the idea? The judge's ruling had given the Trump administration a potential off-ramp to end the probe into Powell, allowing the controversy surrounding the investigation to fade away quietly. Instead, continuing the legal battle means Trump will likely have to wait longer for his hand-picked Fed chair nominee Kevin Warsh to take over the central bank. That's funny. The White House remains focused on working with the Senate to swiftly confirm Kevin Warsh as the next chairman of the Federal Reserve, except they're not allowed to do anything but work on the Save America Act, a fact ignored by White House spokesman Kushner. Do I know that one? Warsh's academic credentials, private sector success, they really like him. That's the guy they want. Tough crap. You got to wait through the end of the term. Pirro's office declined to comment about the ongoing legal battle or if they have discussed the matter with the White House. Powell has said he won't leave the Fed until the probe is concluded. I don't know whether that's even a possibility if it goes past the end of his term, but it's certainly a funny thing to threaten, and I enjoy hearing it. He hinted Wednesday that he could stick around after that somehow. A key senator has said he will continue to stymie Warsh's nomination until the investigation is complete. And the DOJ in January issued subpoenas to Powell and the Fed as part of an investigation into cost overruns in the building renovation project. James Boasberg was the judge on that one, and guess what? They didn't get very far. He ruled that the government had provided no evidence to justify the subpoenas, a decision that Pirro lambasted. Oh no. Hi everyone, it's me, Commercial Guy, this time here to remind you that there are a number of ways you can support the show even without spending a dime, except for the dime that you spent on internet access so you could hear the show. Ignore that one. Anyway, I'm talking about feeding the evil algorithms that make the modern internet tick. When those YouTubers and TikTokers plead with you to smash that like button or subscribe so you never miss an episode, or even just leave a comment, it's because they know that it makes the algorithms more likely to recommend their content to other users. And they must know what they're talking about because their shows have millions of subscribers. And mostly those shows are terrible. We rule. So go find us on YouTube, find us on Libsyn, Stitcher, or Patreon, or Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Amazon, Pandora, and then like us, love us, post a comment, ring the bell, punch the clown, shock the monkey, whatever you're supposed to do on that platform to make that algorithm think we're cool. Thanks so much for helping us blindly walk into Skynet's oblivion, but maybe with a little extra coin in our pockets. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Want to hear more about crazy-ass Jeanine Pirro and her insistence that the law isn't the law and nobody knows what they're talking about except me? So Judge James Boasberg, Chief Judge of the U.S. Of the federal courts in the trial courts in the D.C. district, ruled last week that the government had provided no evidence, zero. How much evidence do you need in order to justify a subpoena? Some. There needs to at least be what? Probable cause to get there? All right. Well, at any rate, they've provided none. And Jeanine Pirro takes exception. This process has been arbitrarily undermined by an activist judge, she said in a press conference following the ruling. Trump on Sunday also lamented Boasberg's decision to reject the subpoena, saying he should be removed from cases pertaining to the Trump administration and accusing him of having Trump derangement syndrome. In a Truth Social post, the president referred to Boasberg as a wacky, nasty, crooked, and totally out of control judge. I believe the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has just finished saying these personal attacks on judges must stop because reasons. Next steps, what comes up next? Pirro had asked the judge to reconsider his ruling. There was zero evidence. Would you reconsider that ruling? Sure. 0 plus 0 is 0. There's still zero evidence. I really don't know what to do. Okay. Sorry, no. The next steps in the process will be for Powell and the central bank to respond to Pirro's request for reconsideration and the judge to rule on the motion. They're going through the whole thing. I mean, he could have said, let me think. No, you're a moron. Dismissed. But instead he's saying, fine, I'll have a hearing next week where you can tell me more zero evidence about this thing, and I will fairly consider it, deliberate, and come back. And if you offer me zero more evidence, I'll come back with the sum total, 0 plus 0 equals 0, and then you can go appeal. And you can take it to the D.C. Circuit, and they can say there's still 0, but maybe you'll be lucky and you'll draw two Trump judges and one normal judge. Or maybe you'll get 3 Trump judges. I don't know if there are 3 Trump judges on the D.C. Circuit. And they'll all say magically, there's a ton of evidence. Go for it. Go to trial. You can't wait. Can hardly wait to hear from you. At which point, by the way, the case goes back down to the D.C. Circuit for trial. Judge Boasberg may or may not be the presiding judge there, but we'll see. All right. So where were we here? Right. Pirro's request for reconsideration gets heard, I guess, after that. The judge will rule on the motion according to a person familiar with the matter. That is to say, someone who knows how courts work, I guess. If the Justice Department loses, then a formal appeal to the D.C. Circuit can be made. A Fed spokesperson declined to comment on any potential legal response. In a filing last week, the Fed's attorneys said, and this is great, the beauty of this is that the federal government is paying for both sides of this lawsuit. Isn't this great? In a filing last week, the Fed's attorneys said the central bank intends to file an opposition to the motion for reconsideration. The Fed's understanding, the attorneys added, is that the opposition is due on or before March 27th, so that's next Friday. The subpoenas are related to the Fed's ongoing $2.5 billion renovation of its headquarters in Washington. And mind you, at the same time, Trump wants 100 times as much money to blow up more things that were blown up last week in Iran. So that's a pretty good use of our money. Testimony Powell provided about the construction before the Senate Banking Committee last year. That's also part of the focus. Powell, in an unusually forceful video response to the subpoenas in January, we heard it, characterized the investigation as motivated by the Fed refusing to set interest rates according to Trump's preferences. Like, get the hell out of here already. Powell's term as chair is set to end in May, but his term on the Fed's Board of Governors doesn't expire. Aha, there's the answer. Until 2028. He said Wednesday he would serve as chair in an acting capacity. How do you like that? Until his successor is confirmed. I have no intention of leaving the board until the investigation is well and truly over with transparency and finality, he said in a routine press conference following the Fed's latest rate decision. So that might end up coming back and biting Donald Trump anywhere on his ample and expansive ass. And I don't know whether he's considered any of that, but it doesn't seem he's considered much of anything in his entire life. So probably not this either. That would be funny if he says, I'm going to stay in place until the successor is named, but there's a hold on his successor until the investigation is over. Drop the investigation. There's more. The president, who has long implored both Powell and the Fed to cut interest rates aggressively, has said Warsh will be more willing to reduce borrowing costs. Trump's attempts to target Powell have raised concerns within Congress that the central bank's independence could be at risk. It's also raised concerns within the Supreme Court that its independence could be at risk. A shift that could have major ramifications for the U.S. economy, which totally needs more major ramifications right now. Senator Tom Tillis, who's on his way out the door and is now bravely holds a key vote on the Senate Banking Committee, has been one of the leading voices against the investigation into Powell for the time being, I guess, saying he will block Warsh's nomination until the probe is fully resolved or he loses his seat and has to take off. All I want to do is bring out to the public that this guy is incompetent. Trump, this was Trump, I missed it, said on Thursday during a press conference in the Oval Office with Japan's Prime Minister. Oh, I forgot about that. Oh, my gosh. Yeah, you will have heard about that one. He's a very incompetent guy and maybe a very dishonest guy, but somebody's dishonest because there's no way that building can be $3 to $4 billion. Okay, sure, why not? Your ballroom is $500 million, but there's no way that an entire Fed complex could possibly be that much. having been basically built from scratch. But yeah, anyway, he knows nothing about anything. He's just saying whatever he thinks will get him out of the room with the least amount of trouble. But nothing gets him in trouble while he's in the room. That press conference with the Japanese prime minister, I mean, it basically came down to Trump was seconds away. I don't know what stopped him from putting his fingers up to his eyes and pulling them back and making, and using a fake Asian accent or something and talking to the Japanese prime minister. It was the worst thing that's ever gone on, I think, between a United States president and a Japanese prime minister, besides being at war. And that includes vomiting on previous Japanese prime ministers. Yes, I think we all know about that one. But they sat there, they were doing their Jabba's Palace press availability where the two leaders sit in the golden chairs in front of the golden fireplace. And one of them sits there silently in astonishment while Donald Trump answers questions posed to both of them and says stuff like what? He was basically asked by a member of the Japanese press, I believe. It sounded like. I could detect the accent, and I don't think it was a fake jokey accent either. But basically, hey, why didn't you give your allies in Europe or Asia or, like, say, Japan, any warning about the attacks that were coming in the Persian Gulf and in Iran? And, Trump started out with what could have been a feasible point. We didn't really want to tip our hand. We didn't want to, show what was going on. We wanted to use the element of surprise. There was an attack going on. You don't necessarily broadcast that, which I think would have been a semi-acceptable statement, except that other presidents have found a way to do that without ruining the attack, but not Donald Trump. That he can't figure out. Anyway, so then he goes on to say, and hey, who knows more about surprise than Japan? Am I right? And there's this nervous laughter in the room. And maybe outright laughter. Maybe Stephen Miller knew what was coming and had written the joke, and he laughed. But there's sort of nervous laughter even from the Japanese delegation and the Japanese press. And I don't know whether you could say the prime minister actually laughed in that, but she's wearing a grim smile. As long as he's leaving it implied and unstated. But nope, he's not going to leave it implied and unstated. In case you didn't get the joke, he stomps in to kill it. And by the way, this one does not work. So even... well, he gets this at least nervous. Where is he going with this laughter? I mean, who knows more about surprise than the Japanese? Am I right? I mean, how come you didn't tell me about Pearl Harbor, huh? Now, at that point, the nervous laughter turns to, I was going to say groans originally, but that's for like a pun or a bad joke where everybody enjoys the pain of hearing a bad joke. These were like moans or gasps, even like, oh, I can't believe you actually just said you made a Pearl Harbor joke in front of the Japanese delegation. And of course, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Well, it happened 4.5 years before you were born. There's all of that. But okay, I get the metaphor. But still, like, that's a while ago for one thing. And even though there are certainly people who will never forget or forgive any of it, you're there as allies now. You don't do that. And I mean, holy mackerel, it was just such a disaster, and it was super uncomfortable. And the prime minister there is just squirming in her seat like, I have to, protocol demands that I sit here and not, I don't know, punch him in the face, but what are you going to do? I thought he could have gotten away with something there too, like, and still make a quasi-racist joke, but still not be quite as insulting. You don't want to tip your hand when it comes to a military operation. And in Japan, the hand is used like a knife, but not with a tomato. Reference to the old Ginsu knife commercials, I guess. But holy cow, Pearl Harbor, unbelievable. But there you go. I guess you only could have made it worse with atomic bomb jokes, but I don't even know how you make one of those. It was disastrous and widely reported as such. The world is quite rightly ashamed to have anything to do with Donald Trump, and there's just sometimes no way out of it. All right. I mentioned to you that there was a weird and esoteric item that I wanted to share with you And I don't know whether we're going to read through the whole thing, because there's a point made at the top of the article which I think brings everything home succinctly enough. But then there is an interview appended to it, or maybe the whole thing really is supposed to be an interview, and the appendix is the stuff up at the top explaining the situation. But that's the stuff that I found most interesting. And I started to read the interview, but I didn't make it all the way through, so I'm not sure how much more there is to discover. But this is from The Atlantic. Maybe turning war into a casino was a bad idea. And of course, if your president is Donald Trump, turning anything into a casino is a bad idea. A disturbing new low in the poly market era by Charlie Warzel. This is a great point. A great point is being made in this article. Let me just read you this sort of introductory material, and then we'll decide how far we go with the actual interview. But, we've been worried about this for a while. The betting markets have always been kind of a strange phenomenon, and they justify themselves in very weird ways. And now they've made this switch over. It reminds me a lot of the AI phenomenon, in that they have this idea that in theory it can lead to, these betting markets can lead to a clarity of information, that the market, if everybody puts their money where their mouth is about what they believe will happen, you will come out with the most likely prediction. And as time goes on, and as more people put more and more stakes on the outcome, you will get the true prediction of the outcome more often than not. Not always, but it's this very weird theoretical, it's a game theory economics type. Game theory is what it is. This goes beyond what it's really capable of doing, I think, because there are so many other distortions in it. But that has not mattered. What has mattered most to these guys is that with this sort of official, this quasi, neutral explanation of what betting markets really are and the power of their predictive power has been used as cover to forge these so-called strategic partnerships. And I think we read another article that referred to this quite correctly, that should be read as gave money to. We formed a strategic partnership with Polymarket. That is to say, they gave each other money. But now news organizations are doing that. So Polymarket has a news organization partner. Kalshi has a news organization partner. I forget who's who with all of them, but they're both partnered with, major news outlets, CNN or what have you. And the cross promotion element of it that we would notice when we're reading the news is that they will try to, force down your throat links to, go see what people on Kalshi are saying about this and what the predictions are. And that's a totally separate line of inquiry. I'm not interested in it. Sometimes they'll force it into the text of the article too, where it just doesn't belong. But on top of it all, there's this theory, like I said, that the prediction markets have news value, and they don't, just as AI doesn't have any content generation value, though they really wish it did, and they've bet heavily on people believing that it will, and they're whistling right past the graveyard and insisting that everybody get invested in it, and they're investing so much money in it that they're convincing people who should know better to promote it to audiences that should be having nothing to do with it, like in the education setting. So here's the point that's being made here in The Atlantic, and they draw a parallel to a story you might have picked up along the way, though I don't think we've discussed it. On March 10th, the journalist Emmanuel Fabian reported on a missile that had been launched from Iran. The warhead hit an open area outside Jerusalem, which Fabian confirmed by speaking with rescue services and reviewing footage of the explosion. He wrote a short post on the Times of Israel's live blog and moved on. Meanwhile, gamblers had wagered millions on the unfolding events of the conflict. So you might say, I know that's stupid and it's bad and it's in poor taste, but what difference does it make in the real world if people want to gamble on this stuff? And here's the answer. Fabian's post became the subject of a major dispute on Polymarket, a popular prediction market where people can bet on the outcome of almost anything. The site had allowed users to guess when Iran would initiate, quote, a drone, missile, or airstrike on Israel's soil, unquote. More than $14 million was riding on whether such an attack had happened on March 10th, right? They saw his report, and now they were wondering whether or not this thing had occurred because, you know, if it's verifiable and true, you pay off, you settle the market. But what if it's not? Or what if it is, but you can make it not be clear? And this is where we're going with this. People started reaching out to ask Fabian to change his article. Some argued that Israeli Defense Forces had not officially mentioned such an attack occurring on that day, and others said that the explosion he had reported was the result of a missile being intercepted, which according to Polymarket's terms wouldn't count as a strike on Israel's soil. Confident in his reporting, though, Fabian did not amend the text. And then he began receiving threats. Quote, you will discover enemies who will be willing to pay anything, like this person is, to make your life miserable within the framework of the law. Like suddenly had the idea maybe I could be charged for this. One person wrote to Fabian before adding, as far as I know, there are also some people who don't really care about the law, and you're going to make them lose about 50 times what you'll ever make. What a pleasant fellow. Much as athletes, it turns out, have faced threats and harassment from fans with money riding on a game, thanks to the more obvious betting markets and FanDuel and DraftKings and whatever else, prediction markets are now creating incentives for gamblers to target all manner of people with inside information or some influence over major events, like let's say Donald Trump. Polymarket did not respond to my request for comment, but wrote on Twitter, this behavior violates our terms of service and has no place on our platform. We've banned the accounts for all involved and will pass their info to the relevant authorities, who may or may not be getting cut in on the action. You see the problem? It is really rather amazing that the gurus and evangelists for prediction markets still think, you know, of this thing as some pure example of truth seeking. Well, people will put their money where their mouth is. They'll bet a stake, and then they'll be motivated to tell what they really think is going to happen. All's well, I guess, with that in the abstract. But one, who cares what they think is going to happen? We care what actually happened. And two, of course it's going to create incentives to point shave or change the shape of the information or even falsely report information or use insider information illegally to bet on things that they know about or can cause to happen so that they can get paid off. Gambling always produces something like this, always, and very quickly. And yet they were sure that, well, our kind of gambling, because it's about the news instead of sports, will be high-minded and truth-seeking. No, it won't. It's gambling. What's wrong with you? Why are you hiding from the truth like this? I thought you were a truth seeker. What's your problem? It's really amazing. Prediction markets like Polymarket post online using the language of news wires and position themselves, I should read this linked article from Position Themselves, as a new and unbiased source of information. Yet this story suggests that these sites are having the opposite effect. They make it harder for news gatherers to report the truth. Yesterday, Fabian spoke with me from southern Israel about what it's like to be in the center of this controversy while simultaneously trying to cover a war. What he described was yet another way that online events are twisting the very nature of reality, leaving Fabian, for just a split second, to doubt what he had seen and heard. And I'll give you a little taste of the way this interview goes, because it is, I think, at least at the beginning, quite revealing. There's more. So Charlie Warzel, conducting the interview, asks, well, how are you doing? Do we really need to know about that? There it is. Emmanuel Fabian answers, look, it's an overwhelming few days. I've been busy reporting on the war, and on top of that, I've been having to deal with the police and my family and all of these death threats and harassment. So it's been a lot. Are you still getting death threats now? I'm not. They stopped almost as soon as I went to the police. Since the article I wrote about them went up, I haven't received anything. That's good. You published your original blog on March 10th. People began reaching out to you after that. But when did you make the connection to Polymarket? And remember, Polymarket and Kalshi are the good ones. We have official partnerships with real live news sites and everything. And it's a good thing. Well, listen to this answer. When did you make the connection to Polymarket? It took me a little while. When I got the first email about the missile impact, I thought the question, whether the missile exploded or was intercepted, scattering shrapnel, was so odd because it was such a minor, inconsequential detail in the context of a big war. The next day, but you could disguise it like, we're just after accuracy. We want the true story. And sometimes it can affect things. But, if you're thinking about it affecting reactions or, international relations in any way, no. It's just about, do I get paid or not? That's a pretty base motivation. Anyway, listen. He says a minor inconsequential detail in the context of a big war. The next day, I got a second email with the exact same questions. And I thought it was very strange. My theory was that it was either Iranian bots or agents trying to get information out of me. I did entertain the idea that it was related to gambling, but I didn't find the bet initially when I searched online. And again, here, just another side comment about this, getting more questions with the exact, or more emails with the same questions. I've certainly run into situations where the whole show is basically in search of reading these reports and saying, I don't think that's exactly right. I bet that detail was misreported, or what if it was just wrong? Or of course, somebody gave them information that was wrong intentionally. I guess it could be mistakenly, but intentionally misleading a reporter, or more to our concern, since we assume everybody's trying to mislead reporters, that they just got details of, let's say, procedure wrong. They keep saying things like, everybody knows it requires 60 votes to pass anything in the Senate. No, wait. This is going to become important one day. It might not be important in this situation, and I see why you're arriving at that conclusion, but it's wrong, and here's why you need to know it's wrong going forward. But it isn't questions like that. They're not questioning the accuracy of it just to get the record correct, right? The way it clicked for me, he continues, was that I started to get replies on Twitter and WhatsApp with similar questions like, hey, why haven't you updated your story? I figured something was up, and I looked at the Twitter profiles, and I could see they were very clearly Polymarket gamblers. At that point, it clicked. And soon after, I found the actual page itself for the March 10th bet on whether or not Iran would strike Israel. It was stuck on March 10th, and the market hadn't resolved, as they say it, or paid out. All the comments were people going back and forth, many linking to my little story and other articles. Overall, I got at least 20 different messages across email, Twitter, WhatsApp, and Discord. And Warzelli asks him, you said a contact from another media outlet also reached out to you at this time and suggested that they had gotten a tip that your story was wrong. Was this person involved in the gambling as well? And of course, right? They messaged and said, somebody I know. So he gets a note from a colleague, another journalist, who says, somebody I know told me there's a mistake in your story. And there could be, right? People could have inside knowledge. Could you correct it? Now, he thought he was doing both of us a little favor. I told him his acquaintance was likely betting on this, on Polymarket. And my contact went back to him, and he confirmed that not only was he betting on it, but he offered to give the person money if they managed to persuade me to change my story. It's all insane. Obviously, the colleague told him off, but I'm losing my mind at this point. This is like the most tiny, inconsequential detail in a small news item. But there was another path to do this, right? If he can't convince him to change his story, if you're a journalist, if you know this person and they convince you or bribe you, like, you could absolutely file a similar story with the opposite conclusion in there, that it was in fact intercepted and it was shrapnel. Witnesses said, and no one would blame you for that kind of confusion, but it would result in $14 million in bets moving the other way. And if you're cut in for $1 million of it, there are some dumbass news sites out there that are doing fake news all the time. And if they could fund themselves forever by just all you need to do is publish an article that will freeze this market in place, and it'll save me $14 million, and I'll cut you in. That's what you're going to start finding. So a little bit more before we cut out for the break. Warzel says, so you decide to call these people out on Twitter. Did the harassment pick up after that? It did. A lot. I thought calling them out would shut them up. Whoops. And get them off my back. I wanted to be proactive because I realized if I give in to these people, it shows I can be manipulated. And this will just be the beginning, and they won't stop trying to bully me in later stories. And that's when it escalated. Death threats, messages coming in at all hours of the night, messages talking about my family, giving me ultimatums on how much time I had to correct the story. And that's when I went to the police. Did you ever think about changing the story? Well, for a split second, I did. I thought maybe I could be wrong. And that's a normal thought to have. Like doubting your reporting. After all, you're making these calls based on other witnesses and videos online. Well, I went and checked again with the military. It was a short item, but I reviewed footage of a large explosion. I had eyewitness accounts, people in the area who saw this massive explosion. And I thought to myself, why am I doing this? Triple checking a minor incident. Bothering the military again over an explosion in the woods. I did the reporting, and this was the judgment call I made. I think it was accurate, and I'll leave it at that. I don't need to doubt myself about what I published, especially because this is not something anyone normally would care about unless they had a financial stake in the outcome. As an event in this war, it is not particularly newsworthy. The missile exploded in an open area. It's 150 words in the live blog. So Warzel asks one more question. Here are a couple more. We'll see what we can get in. Do you think this fiasco will stick in the back of your mind as you continue to report on the war? Yes, I think it already has. And since then, whenever I report on something, I feel it in the back of my head. What if the poly market bettors are betting on this tweet? Or on whether I'm giving an interview about poly market? I'm not obsessing over it, but hopefully I won't get threatened again. But the thought is there. What if they suddenly see this interview? Because I don't know the way they've resolved the poly market bet yet. Wait, really? Yeah, we don't know yet. I'll review whether we need to conclude this thing. But wow, how insane is this? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. This is a really wild story, and I think it has some widespread, some broad implications. But on the other hand, it was also so easy to see it happening in the sports market because it's like actually a tradition of point shaving and sports cheating in response to gambling. And I'm not sure in the initial contemplation of prediction markets whether or not the inventors and promoters of these prediction markets thought very much about the nature of what they were asking people to bet on. I don't believe they had. I think they had an understanding of betting markets, but I think they thought they were taking betting upscale for one thing because it was about news, which is just a fact. And can you bet on factual outcomes? But they may or may not have had in mind the amount of subjectivity and other factors that go into reporting, up to and including, of course, just grafting sports betting cheating onto news betting cheating. Cheating is cheating, and people are going to want to do it wherever they can. It's, the idea that somehow people betting on news were going to be more high-minded and truth-seeking than people betting on sports. I just don't know why. Betting is just, it is what it is. It doesn't really matter what you're betting on, whether it's the, people's guesses about the fundamental value of stocks or basketball games or how a news event is reported, right? You can see how this is a great example of it. If you can fight over whether or not you should be getting paid off on this thing, it pays to try to shape the coverage of it. So anyway, he says, I don't even know how they resolved this poly market bet yet. And Warzel, for some reason, is surprised by that. And he says, yeah, I'm looking now, and the market is still not resolved. The market, Iran strikes Israel on March 10th, resolved to yes after Fabian and I spoke. They had to do something with it. Did the fact that the poly market kept allowing people to bet while this harassment was going on make things worse for you? It seems that a lot of people came into the bet as a result of my calling it out on Twitter. When I posted about it, the market had $12 million on it. When I published my story on Monday, it had $14 million on it. Now it looks like it has $22 million on it. People are still betting and hoping it goes their way. Having been through this ordeal, what are your feelings about prediction markets in general? It's really worrying. I think the gambling is a degenerate thing. The fact that people are betting on wars and conflict and people dying is gross. This is war, not a game. I think more worrying thing, though, is that we've seen harassment by bettors against athletes in sports for failing to perform. It now seems that we're entering a new age. I think there's a big risk of journalists using insider information to place correct bets and win. I can tell you as a military correspondent that I'm exposed to confidential information that we can't report. Now there are ways to exploit that. It wouldn't surprise me if others have. And I mean, as we, by the way, continue to use either AI to replace journalists or make cuts to the funding for newsrooms, etc., and reporters getting paid less and less, that will only mean more and more incentive to supplement your income. Why wait for publishing a book if you can supplement your income by betting on the prediction markets? But I think he's got his eyes. It's interesting that he looks towards journalists as being the cheaters on this, whereas it's probably more worrisome to think about the truth-seeking bettors in the market. And a good point, sort of, made by the person who wrote to threaten him. Like, I just want to get the news right and bet on the news, but there are some people who will murder you for not doing the right news, or will do a murder so that they can win a bet or something like that. You know, I mean, that's one of the problems, too. They'll be innocent but overindulgent and over active bettors, on the so-called legitimate side of the market. But then there'll also be people who are like, I don't really care what the outcome of the event is. I just want to win the money. I don't want to be right in my predictions. I don't really care so much about that. I just want money. And who knows what they'll do, especially if they aren't just news nerds betting from their mom's basement, but are instead Russian mobsters, let's say. Anyway, and who knows, right? Will Polymarket take bets on, will Russian mobsters murder this person? I don't know. Who's that person? I got no idea. There's no reason to know anything about it, but I guess I'll bet on it casually. But, why bet that market, considering that the people who are going to do the murder have probably bet on it? You're not going to win over them. Anyway, back to this. Warzel asks him, insider trading, one could argue, effectively makes prediction markets more accurate. And that's the theory right behind it. But behind the boy geniuses who are, promoting Kalshi and Polymarket. Well, what about insider trading and insider manipulation? Well, you see, that's actually correct information. And this is a way, in theory, it's a way of drawing it out and pricing it into the market, rather than have people with insider information making their bets on it in secret. This will, if the prediction market starts moving in that direction, you can be pretty sure that there's somebody out there. If they are using insider information, they ought to be followed in the stock market. Let's say if it's a stock type question, in ways that they can't be because they're frozen out of trading for a certain period of time before a big announcement or whatever. But they could secretly be bringing their information to our truth-seeking engine. Yes, or there could be murderous thugs bringing false information to your truth-seeking engine, and it doesn't really differentiate between the two. But anyway, I don't think they really want to combat insider trading, Fabian says. What I've heard is that those who bet on Polymarket either know the right answer or are wasting their money. And that's like the prediction market wunderkind's like wry answer to all of this. Well, what if there's insider trading? Well, good. I hope there is, because there's only two possibilities. They're either telling you what's really going to happen, which is valuable information, or they're wasting their money. And why would a rational economic actor want to waste their money? I don't know. Why would a rational economic actor not want to simply murder someone for profit if they thought that they could do it anonymously? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, you should. You're a wunderkind. You're supposed to be thinking about things. But as we know, we learned in the last week, apparently the geniuses of Silicon Valley really believe that there's no such thing as introspection and ought not to be. So I guess you're going to get this answer every single time because it's one of the habits of a highly effective person, after all. Who moved my cheese? Anyway, right. I don't think they want to combat insider trading, Fabian says. What I've heard is those who bet on Polymarket either know the right answer or they're wasting their money. Now, in a statement to the Times of Israel, Polymarket said, prediction markets depend on the integrity of independent reporting. Attempts to pressure journalists or alter their reporting undermine that integrity and undermine the markets themselves. Warzel asks, do you have advice to other journalists who might experience this kind of thing? Go public is the answer. Don't let the threats of force you to change anything. Be honest. I think that's the best way. It's a bit stupid of these people to publicly intimidate someone who can go and instantly tell 100,000 people what the gamblers are doing. That's my advice, like until somebody gets killed anyway. Because if you were to accept money or change your reporting, who knows how these people might extort you later on. If you change your reporting, it'll be a mess forever. That's true. If you could sit down with the CEO of Polymarket, what would you tell him? I know what I'd tell him. You're out of business, and they're under arrest. But he says, I don't know. I'd be honest and say I disagree with the notion of gambling on anything and everything. But if you are going to keep these markets, they have to have admins who can decide on outcomes of bets or issue some kind of a ruling. I think there just needs to be a lot more oversight and somebody actually vetting those who are big bettors, and to avoid insider trading, but also to make sure that this harassment doesn't happen. But I'm not an expert on this. I'm more of an expert on where missiles land. Okay. I don't know. I just found that to be a really interesting aspect of life in the modern era and a good reason why we should all frown really, really hard on these partnerships, these so-called partnerships between news organizations and prediction markets, and not allow them to pretend that it's some kind of neutral revenue stream or just an interesting way of double checking the news or anything like that. There's just no value added to it by having these prediction markets. And these game theorist ideas about what the value is are stupid and unrealistic. And just like everything else, I mean, I guess they figure, well, it's no more stupid or unrealistic than the stock market where a company that produces nothing but financial losses can have a $20 billion valuation. But, so they have a point there, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every computer science geek should also have that much money. Maybe nobody should. All right. Well, anyway, I just thought that was interesting addition to the mix. Another story, and I think this one came to me from Scott, and we have to thank him by yelling at him for that one. While we're in the zone of reporting on fabulists like Mark Wayne Mullen, this is a report from, where the hell is this? The Rooster? What's the Rooster? I don't know. We could look into it, but it's a Substack. DJ Burns is writing here. He may be the only writer at the Rooster. It might be his Substack. I don't know. But the story isn't about DJ. It's about somebody else. It's about Carl Setzer. The many lives, in fact, of Carl Setzer, Ohio's most intriguing congressional candidate, which is quite a thing given that, well, I guess Dr. Action, right? Dr. Amy Action is running for governor still. I don't know what happened in that campaign. We haven't heard much about it. But there's a lot of interesting folks in Ohio, including, as you know, Dr. Gay Hitler, long dead, but you can't beat that for intriguing lives in Ohio. Anyway, from a doomsday cult to international craft beer titan, sure, why not, to long-shot congressional candidate Setzer hopes to awaken the echoes of the Democratic Party long dead in northeastern Ohio. That seems weird. What's going on here? A raging nationwide debate within the Democratic Party has landed in Ohio's 14th congressional district, which encompasses the state's 5 most northeastern counties. Should the party lean on experienced candidates with institutional know-how to repel Trumpism? Or should the party seek a new generation of candidates willing to conduct themselves outside the traditional confines of business as usual? Yeah, we are being asked that question all the time these days. Should Nazi tattoo but oyster farmer guy, so therefore genuine somehow, be allowed to represent the Democratic Party in Maine? Or should we have institutionalist, proven elected officials like the mayor of a local city or online activists and previous TikTok content creators, but who are very mad about ICE, and correctly so, be nominated for Congress? We have this problem all the time. There's pros and cons to it. Ask the betting markets, I guess, what they think we ought to be doing. Well, let's see. Former Supreme Court Justice Bill O'Neill represents the former camp. I guess that means the institutional know-how, folks. Even if his last campaign featured an infamous, ambiguous Facebook post that made it seem like he... this is the way it's written. Make it seem like he banged former Governor Robert Taft among 50 very attractive females while lampooning the perceived excesses of the Me Too movement. I don't know what's going on here exactly, but here embedded is a Bill O'Neill maybe Facebook post. Now that the dogs of war are calling for the head of Senator Al Franken, I believe it's time to speak up on behalf of all heterosexual males. I wouldn't start anything this way. As a candidate for governor, let me save my opponent some research time. In the last 50 years, I was sexually intimate with approximately 50 very attractive females. Don't do it. It ranged from a gorgeous personal secretary. Here's what's happening. It ranged from a gorgeous personal secretary to Senator Bob Taft, Sr., who was my first true love, and we made passionate love in the hayloft of our parents' barn in Gallipoli? Gallipolis? I don't know how you pronounce it, but that's not the important part. And ended with a drop-dead gorgeous redhead who was a senior advisor to Peter Lewis at Progressive Insurance in Cleveland. Yeah, that could use some punctuation. Okay. You see how that happened? Now we can get back to discussing legalizing marijuana and opening the state hospital network to combat the opioid crisis. I am so disappointed by this national feeding frenzy about sexual indiscretions decades ago. Peace. This does not help. Okay, so Carl Setzer, a political newcomer, has raised in a right-wing Christian doomsday cult. Hooray! And former craft beer pioneer in China, among other titles, represents the latter camp. Things are going great in the 14th district. On paper, and by almost any traditional metric, O'Neill should be considered the favorite to win the primary. Oh no. And likely face longtime Republican incumbent Dave Joyce in November. But that would be unfair to Setzer, the kid from Paynesville, who, despite his political noviceness, is that right? Is that a word? Has led seemingly multiple lives that led to this particular moment in our shared history. In recent weeks, the Rooster sat down with Setzer at the Ohio State House to discuss his personal history, his vision for the Democratic Party, and what makes him built for our current times. And he's got a beard, so I guess that's the answer. Setzer moved back to Ohio after the pandemic, and private equity gremlins wrecked his internationally acclaimed Great Leap Brewing. Is it acclaimed? Which he had built from scratch in China after he and his wife left otherwise lucrative careers. China, huh? That Setzer is running for Congress wouldn't surprise him in his youth. That he was doing so as a Democrat, however, would. Oh, and that's dangerous and weird. Setzer points to the Colonel as an influential figure in his youth and told the Rooster that he was groomed from a young age with the intention of seizing power to benefit their Christian sect. I have neglected to notify you that we are in a new section, I guess, the header of which it's difficult to understand this format of this page, but I guess the next section was how the right wing grooms young men of distinction, really, with their eyes on the halls of Congress and Supreme Court. The distinction is questionable, I guess, but we'll see what they're after. So Setzer says the Colonel was an influential figure in his youth. And I don't know. Now, the only thing that brings to mind for me, given that he's saying it is in the context of grooming, brings to mind that the character from Boogie Nights was referred to as the Colonel, the guy who was financing all of the porn that was being made, but had his own pedophilia issues. I don't know what to tell you. Cesar pointed to another Ohioan, J.D. Vance, as someone who also almost assuredly went through the same process, although through a different pipeline. I guess it's a widespread thing. This is bizarre. And there's a little video clip, I guess, in which he describes all of it. And I guess I would recommend to you that you know, if you're interested, spend some time with the video. But I mean, the write-up gives you just a taste of what there is to discover here. On Y2K, what? Yeah, which didn't go as the Doomsday Preppers thought or frankly hoped. There is another video offered. And the description here says readers of a certain age will remember the Y2K hysteria, which in reality turned out to be no big deal, other than some airport departure and arrival terminals displaying their pertinent dates as 1900 instead of 2000. It was a sigh of relief for most normal Americans who, it must be said, didn't belong to doomsday cults that had been stockpiling weapons and other necessities in preparation for the threat of society. I guess threat, maybe, of society disintegrating. Thankfully, Carl was young enough that he missed prophecy. The missed prophecy serves as a stepping stone on his way back to normalized society. I mean, I'm told. Normal. I don't know. It worries me when people like this, you know, find their way into the Democratic primary. But I guess good. They realized they were crazy and needed to change direction. Setzer's message to MAGA voters, are you any happier, is the subject of discussion next in the next video. The Rooster, as a policy, is skeptical of former Republicans running as Democrats, but Setzer blew through those doubts over our 90-plus minute conference. In fact, I walked away thinking that Setzer's Christian nationalist background will be an asset in talking to disaffected MAGA voters who won't be asked to vote against their golden god in this election cycle. For example, Setzer is pushing a consumer bill of rights, which strikes at the heart of the righteous anger Americans feel when they know they're getting ripped off at seemingly every turn. From Setzer's campaign site, some rhetoric here quoted, as American consumers, we should have the right to a master control that instantly disables microphones and camera access across all apps and all layers of a device's operating system. As American consumers, we should have the right to unsubscribe from all subscriptions universally at any time from a centralized control point. Something like that, maybe. As American consumers, we should be required to give explicit consent to any payment that is automatically set to auto-renew at checkout. Very specific, but okay. As American consumers, we should have the right to claw back funds drawn by any company or subscription with which we have not interacted for more than 30 days. I don't know where you want to set the bar, but okay, I get the point. And I think everybody else does too. It's all about economic anxiety, as it turns out. These are things that everyday Americans can understand a lot easier than tax credits for starting a small business in an economically disadvantaged area, or whatever the hell it was that Kamala Harris ran on, says the writer here. Setzer understands the anger without presenting himself as an angry guy. He's a breath of fresh air in a Democratic race, where the other option is a grown man who threw a fit because sex pests suffered consequences for their actions in 2017. Setzer carries the Rooster's complete and total endorsement. He capitalizes that, and we hope to have more coverage with him in his neck of the woods before the May 5th primary. I recommend maybe you look a little bit closer, but I just wanted to let you know that was out there. Another one of these races shaping up with a less than satisfactory institutional figure, I guess, carrying the bulk of the prediction market, I would guess, about who's going to carry the banner forward, and an outside insurgent regular guy, but who also has a little bit of weird why don't you justism going on as well. A familiar pattern, this time shaping up in one specific example, Ohio's 14th district. Is that close to home, Scott? Is that, closer than here anyway, or is it home, I guess is the real question. Fascinating story. All right, moving on and back to Instapaper just to see what else I had lined up for you. Another note that I got from Scott, by the way, just to throw this one out there. I know that he knows that I enjoy these things when there are pictures taken with people whose heights are known, and they're taking their picture next to Donald Trump, who we know claims to be 6'3", and hey, this person is known to be 5'10", and these guys appear to be the same height. I wonder about these things. Irish leader exposes Trump's true height in White House image. It's made available to us here through MSN, but I think it was an Irish tabloid reporting the story. The Irish Star. Irish leader exposes Trump's true height in White House image on St. Patrick's Day. Story here by Peter Rubenstein. And it's the two side by side. Trump, of course, claiming to be 6'3". And this is a St. Patrick's Day appearance in the White House in which the Prime Minister, we learned at one point how to pronounce the name of the office. Tasek is something like that. Is that right? Michael Martin. And, you know, there's an odd spelling and accent to it. And so I'm not up to speed on the correct Irish pronunciation. But here he is presenting some shamrocks, a bowl of shamrocks to the American president on St. Patrick's Day, apparently a tradition. And you know why. Anyway, the two of them are sitting side by side. I don't know that there's, you know, clear, hard and fast information available or any reason to believe that the online information is there that will nail down Martin's height as 5'10". I only say that because even in this write-up, they're basically like, well, Martin's height is listed as 5'10" in online sources, but a lot of it is very often just AI slop. I've myself, you know, being fascinated by all this, looked up the height. How tall is such and such a person? And unless they're athletes, there's really never been any reason to verify their height and put that online. Anyway, this guy is said to be 5'10", and they're not standing, but they're sitting in the same chair. Trump is a little, you know, hunched over, I guess. But if it's 6'3" and 5'10", they shouldn't appear to be the same height even when sitting. And then there's a standing photo, though, standing in front of the mantelpiece. And if he's 5'10", you know, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. In the standing photo, this guy's, you know, partially bald dome appears to be just an inch or two higher than Trump's cotton candy fluff on top of his head. So I don't know what to tell you. But it does say here, I don't know what document, but it doesn't matter. The document noted that Trump's height was 75 inches. So I think this is from his health checkup, his official report from the doctors. 75 inches or 6'3". If true, it would put him several inches taller than Martin, whose height is listed on some sites anyway as 5'10". And it doesn't really matter whether it's entirely accurate. I don't think, if there were other sites saying, you know, he's not 5'10", he's 6'5", you would be hearing about that in the article, but you're not. So I don't know what to tell you. The guy is shrinking, and I'm happy to highlight that, even though it's not actually very important. Just sort of a pet interest of mine, so I thought I would tell you about it. Okay, let's see. Other things that I need to share with you. This one is on Blue Sky, and I have to open it up in order to find out what was it that made it so interesting. Oh, yes. All right. Okay, this leads us to another story, which we absolutely have to give you before the weekend. This is, for some reason, I've decided to park the Blue Sky post from Jillian Brockel, who we've called out before. Fantastic new clues here about both the DHS marketing contract scandal and the 10 jet purchases scandal. Surprise! They may be related, both possibly engineered by one Dr. William A. Walters III. There is a thread here. We should read it, but what it starts with is a reference to the NBC article, which maybe you have heard. Some DHS contractors, and remember DHS, much in the news right now, told White House officials they were asked to pay Corey Lewandowski. Essentially, long story short, because we only have a minute here before we depart for our last break, Now that Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski are on their way out the door at DHS, it comes to pass that people have been saying that even he had no official role there. For whatever reason, he was basically talking to people seeking contracts with the Department of Homeland Security and saying, you know, I've got a certain methodology, wink, wink, by which I can more or less guarantee you winning the contract. You know, those competitively bid contracts with DHS worth several $billions. But if I do that for you, I expect to be rewarded for doing it. There should be a fee for this. If I bring you a $10 billion contract, maybe $1 million of it goes to me because I'm under the secretary, so to speak, over at DHS. Can't we work something like that out? I would not have put it past him. I believe it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David, still your host for the Kagro in the Morning Show after all these years. Thank you for all your continuing support for the show. And if you're listening regularly and still thinking about getting on board as a supporter, well, the time is now. Patreon.com is the easiest way to make recurring subscription-style payments every month, all year round, to keep us going. patreon.com/KagroX brings you to our page where you can sign up with your monthly support. And hey, have you seen our clever new subscription tiers? It's easier than ever to sign up for, say, one crisp dollar bill for every information-packed 2-hour show. If you're the plan ahead type, there's even a year-long subscription program that saves you 15% on the cover price. Or it would if there was a cover price, or even a cover, for that matter. patreon.com/KAGROX. Thanks again for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I got to bring you this NBC News article first to sort of set the tone, but we're fortunate to have gotten a hold of a thread from Jillian Brockel, I'm not certain how it's pronounced, that shed some light on some additional possible connections to the story. But the story by itself is bad enough. NBC News reporting some DHS contractors told White House officials they were asked to pay Corey Lewandowski. Some companies complained to the Trump administration that Lewandowski had stood to personally profit from the DHS contracting process. Lewandowski denies the allegations and is probably pretty sure he would be pardoned for any crimes he commits anyway, I would add. This with the byline of Julia Ainsley, Matt Dixon, Jonathan Allen, and Laura Strickler for NBC. More than a year ago, the GEO Group founder, George Zoley, asked for a meeting with Corey Lewandowski, a close ally of President Donald Trump, who had just started a powerful position as a top advisor, somehow, to Homeland Security Kristi Noem. Okay, Homeland Security Secretary, obviously, but GEO Group, I think they're the private prison people, if I am not mistaken. As a titan of the private prison industry, GEO Group stood to benefit from Trump's mass deportation agenda, which would require the federal government to spend tens of billions of dollars to transport, detain, monitor, and deport undocumented immigrants, and basically anybody that they didn't like as well. The company's federal contracts in those areas already totaled more than $1 billion per year, but Zoley and his advisors were worried that the road to securing new government contracts now ran through Lewandowski. Why is that a problem? Well, the two had a history. Lewandowski and Zoley had butted heads during the transition between Trump's November 2024 election and his January 2025 inauguration, before Lewandowski officially worked for the government, according to two industry sources and one senior DHS official familiar with the matter. And I don't recall exactly what the end result of all this was, but I think there was a long time when Lewandowski didn't officially work for the government and had to kind of force his way into DHS, even though he couldn't do it as chief of staff. But then he just pretended he was chief of staff anyway. So look, during the transition, Lewandowski told Zoley that he wanted to be paid in exchange for protecting and growing GEO Group's DHS contracts, according to a senior DHS official and three people familiar with their discussion. Zoley, concerned about the propriety of the ask, told Lewandowski he would have no part of it, the sources said, describing the confrontation as tense. Come on, just put $50 $100K in a kava bag and give it to me. That's all I'm asking. No, he wanted too much. That we couldn't afford. I don't know what the actual situation was, but what can I tell you? Breaking news from Apple News. Do I really want to open it? I missed the chance anyway. Oh, no, I didn't. Chuck Norris is dead. There. Just put it to you that way. Everybody thought he would never die. No. 86 years old. Some people will have fond memories of him, but he turned into something of a weirdo in the last 10 years or so. And, of course, we'll be told still, for the next 5 years, we'll still be getting pop-up ads that say one weird trick that Chuck Norris uses, and he drinks olive oil every night before he goes to bed, and here's his exercise machine. And I guess maybe some of those things go away, unless we're being told that he's now exercising in the afterlife, which he might be. Anyway, I don't know. Breaking news. I don't know how else to break it, and I can't soften that news for you either, and I don't know if it has to be. Chuck Norris is tough, and you should be too. There you go. So, we're back to the transition in which Lewandowski tells the Geo Group CEO, I want you to bribe me. I want you to pay me to guarantee that you're going to get some contracts. Lewandowski took a role as an unpaid special government employee at DHS once the new administration was sworn in, where he advised and acted as a, quote, de facto chief of staff to Nome, and sources said influenced contract awards. Zoli scrambled to find a way to assuage tensions. From the meeting during this transition, two industry sources familiar with the matter said he secured a follow-up with Lewandowski in late February or early March of 2025. The second meeting did not go much better. Zoli offered to... that'll be interesting. I've just been handed an article. What am I supposed to do with this? Just read it now because this is on your phone. You want your phone back? I do. You should text this to me. What is this? New York Times headline. Trump's on a deal-making spree. Turn next to... Wait a second. To... Transylvania. Finally, my Russian accent will be useful. Story. We keep saying that it accidentally spills over into what is probably not even a Transylvanian accent, but is classically thought to be the Dracula accent, who does not say blah, blah, blah. But I guess they'll be making some sort of land deals there. Presumably, I don't know. What...
I haven't read it.
Condo graveyards that you can rise from the dead every night. I don't know. We'll find out. But there, great, wonderful. They're making a deal in Transylvania. May it come back to bite them in the neck, I guess. All right. Worth interrupting on a Friday. Why not? Thank you very much. All right. We were talking about Lewandowski wanting to get paid off by Geo Group, and they have a second meeting. Zoli offers to put Lewandowski on retainer, a recurring consulting fee with Geo Group, according to two industry sources familiar with the matter, which is wildly inappropriate, but he offers to do it anyway. Lewandowski nonetheless balks. How much money does he really want? Like, here's a retainer. You just be a special government employee, fly around with Kristi Noem on your Sex Palace plane, maybe get paid by the government, maybe not, and I will give you kickbacks. And he's still like, no, I want more. This should be pretty interesting. Lewandowski balked, saying he wanted to be compensated based on the company's new or renewed contracts with DHS, the two sources said. In other words, he wanted a percentage. More money. Not just give me $100,000 a month or whatever. I want $1 million a month, if that's what it comes down to. He wanted payments, what some people would call a success fee, said a person with knowledge of the meeting. Zoli declined, the two sources said, and in the months that followed, the length of two of Geo Group's federal contracts shrank. And currently, several of its facilities that could house migrants sit idle, even as Congress and Trump have poured money into DHS to execute the mass deportation campaign. I mean, good, but also not great. I don't know. Geo Group officials believe that is tied to their not agreeing to Lewandowski's solicitations, and a source familiar with Geo Group's officials' thinking. A senior DHS official told NBC News that within weeks of Lewandowski's second meeting with Zoli, Lewandowski told him not to award more contracts to Geo Group. Lewandowski, through a spokesperson, denied that. Months later, in December of 2025, Geo Group did receive a new contract for $121 million for services that help locate immigrants DHS is trying to find. That's really their job, but okay, whatever. Lewandowski's spokesperson denied this account of his interactions with the Geo Group. This is absolutely false and did not happen. Mr. Lewandowski never demanded any payment or compensation from the Geo Group at any time, his representative said. Asked whether he has ever received any money from any of the contracts he's signed off on, Lewandowski previously told NBC News in an interview, 0, not 1 penny. 10 trillion pennies, not one. Anyway, now lawmakers are asking about Lewandowski. Noam testified at a congressional hearing earlier this month in which lawmakers asked her about her and Lewandowski's role in government contracts. Is that what the kids are calling it these days? We're contracting? Anyway, Trump called them both after and asked Lewandowski questions about his role in DHS contracting decisions, a source with knowledge of the call told NBC News. If you're not kicking taste of this back to me, then you're really in trouble. The president fired Noam after the hearings, saying she would depart as secretary on March 31st. You just need another month to steal more stuff. Lewandowski told NBC News he has not decided whether he will leave DHS with her. Oh, he hasn't, has he? Well, that's him being an alpha, I guess. On Wednesday, Trump's nominee to replace Noam, Senator, fantasist, etc., Markwayne Mullin, was asked during a congressional hearing if he would cooperate with a probe by Democratic senators into 3 businesses that received $220 million advertising contract featuring Noam. Different bribery. The probe is looking into whether she or Lewandowski financially benefited from that agreement. Mullin said he would cooperate with any DHS Inspector General investigation, but he was actually probably lying. Trump has also recently asked aides whether Lewandowski profited personally from the advertising campaign, NBC News has reported. At one point, allegedly remarking to advisors, Corey made out on that one, but they were probably just talking about one of the planes. Lewandowski's request to Geo Group during transition was made known to some incoming ICE officials, according to 2 senior DHS officials involved in conversations about the matter, and Geo Group and several other companies in government contracting have complained to officials in Trump's inner circle that Lewandowski, as a special government employee, has directly or indirectly stood to personally profit from the DHS contracting process, according to 4 senior White House officials, a former White House official, and a person familiar with the conversations. That seems like you've already told us that. I don't know. One senior White House official raised the issue with Trump during an unrelated, allegedly, meeting in October. 2 current administration officials said before the conversation was cut short by superseding business. And another senior White House official told NBC News that they had received a dozen complaints from at least 4 companies about Lewandowski's involvement in the contracting process during the second Trump administration. Such complaints are rare in the defense contracting industry, in which relationships are often carefully built over years and across political parties. The reports of requests to pay Lewandowski, a government contracting expert told NBC News, would raise red flags. Yes. Under normal circumstances, yes. But, in Pardon Central, no. And I guess that could be the topic of conversation. Are you getting paid in this contracting process? No. All right. Tell me how much you're not getting paid. I have not been paid $10 million. And all this. Terrific. Keep 9. Send 1 to me, and I'll pardon you when it comes an issue. This account, based on 7 months of reporting, not my account, their account, included interviews with nearly 24 people who expressed concern about Lewandowski's role in the contracting process, including current administration officials, current DHS officials, industry sources who have done business with DHS, and lobbyists. These sources were interviewed on a condition of anonymity. You know why. It's not clear, I'll skip down, whether Lewandowski received any money. We don't know yet. We haven't seen his bank account. From business contracting with the government, businesses. He's denied it. The DHS General Counsel's office told NBC News that Lewandowski is in compliance with all required ethics and financial disclosure reporting and training requirements. That is to say, he filed them all. Did he lie on them? That I can't answer. The White House declined to comment. Yada, yada. Let's see. I'm going to have to jump down a little bit here. Lewandowski, who's been referred to as chief inside DHS headquarters, remember he wanted a badge and a gun, has had broad authority over the contract process, 3 current DHS officials said. In an internal policy change last year, Noem decided that she should review and sign off on any deal worth more than $100,000. Now that begins to make a little bit more sense, right? I want to sign off on all of them, not because I want more work, not because I'm going to review them, not because I'm looking for waste, fraud, and abuse, but because I want to have Corey review them for me. Anything that's worth enough money that we can skim off the top, I want to go through Corey so he can skim off the top. That's my suspicion. DHS officials and private industry sources say Noem had largely delegated that review to, you'll never guess, but it rhymes with P. Wendowski, but begins with an L. His spokesperson denied that. I can't believe it. Anyway, previously, $25 million was the trigger for a DHS secretary's approval, but they bumped it down so they could skim off of more things, I guess, and get themselves bidets on their planes. Here's a university law professor, Jessica Tillipman, George Washington University. Guess what? She says it's illegal. All right, great. That's true. If I was, then somebody else chimes in here. If I was a special government employee and I turned to a company and I said, I want to consult, and I'm also then going to be directly involved in personally and substantially overseeing the award of that contract, I would say that would be a blazing red flag of procurement integrity concern. It would be. Except don't worry, he denies getting paid by any of them. Instead, he went to Polymarket to bet on whether or not Geo Group's contracts would be renewed. And voila, he makes his money that way instead. Totally legal and beneficial because it's truth-seeking. All right, so now we've related our first story to our current story. So, all right, it's all very interesting. The rest of the story goes more or less exactly as you would expect, but it's going to take me too long to get through the rest of it. Instead, what I want to do is jump back to Gillian Brockel's commentary on this. Fantastic clues, as she said in this article, about both the DHS marketing contract scandal and the 10 jet purchases scandal. Now, we didn't even get to that, but there is, I guess, more focus at the end of this article that I'm skipping over about Lewandowski's role and what he might have siphoned off of the contract, not with Geo Group and the private prison people, but from the PR people who were part of the $220 million worth of contracts to make television ads featuring Kristi Noem saying nice things about Donald Trump, over which she, I guess, eventually got fired. And in addition to all this, Lewandowski is skimming off of that. But Gillian says there's even more, and that there's a connection between these two things, the jet purchases and skimming off of the contracts, and that the connection might be that they're engineered by one Dr. William A. Walters III. Let's find out what's going on here. Here's a thread linking to what we know about Walters, says Gillian. And Gillian, a journalist with, let's see, she's currently, her focus is tracking ICE flights, which is what led her to the airplanes acquisition story. Bylines in Mother Jones, ZDO, Rolling Stone, American Prospect, formerly Washington Post, Psy, right? Also formerly a flight attendant, interestingly enough, which explains the interest in the aircraft, I guess. Well, anyway, what about this Walters guy? What is the link here? He first showed up in this May 2021 Vanity Fair piece about his State Department unit, OpMed. I think we did mention this guy, which mostly did medevacs, but played a key role in dispersing the COVID-19 vaccine worldwide. Does this ring a bell for you? It reads like a hero movie, fitting since the journalist involved, the Vanity Fair journalist, is a movie producer. It's a Vanity Fair piece, again, from 2021. Title of which is Inside the Secretive Government Unit Saving American Lives Around the World. Very interesting and fun sounding. 3 months later, Vanity Fair had a bizarre follow-up with Walters claiming the U.S.'s exit from Afghanistan was a disaster. A disaster. Thank you, Bernie. Because Antony Blinken hadn't given him, Walters, the promised promotion, a promised promotion, so he quit. This claim is not well sourced, to put it mildly. This time the Vanity Fair article is titled, How Turf Wars Mucked Up America's Exit from Afghanistan. Jillian continues, though, a lot of the op-med team appear to have followed Walters out the door, and he hired many for various startups in the Biden years, and he seems to have taken a hard right turn. Wow, no way. Here's a 2024 anti-Kamala Harris op-ed that he wrote for the Washington Times under the title, Harris Failed the Leadership Test, apparently. A year later, let's see. Oh, we got some blue sky addresses here. Nick Schwellenbach and Dan Friedman published this investigation on a weird $915 million contract one of Walters' firms got. NBC got one thing wrong in today's story. Did we read it? Most of what we know about Walters is because of Nick and Dan. Okay, that's interesting. This that they're pointing to here is a Mother Jones article, how a new firm with DHS ties won a $915 million contract to help immigrants self-deport. The rushed deal was handed to a firm with no track record as a federal contractor, a rival's lawsuit alleges, and maybe, just maybe, it all ran through Lewandowski for a fee. Then Washington Post had its December story about a different contractor, another Walters firm, another contract that another Walters firm got. Got it right here. Walters, another contract, but through a different firm he was running. This time to purchase 6 planes for ICE's own deportation fleet, right? DHS inks contract to create its own fleet of 737 jets for deportations. The agency will spend nearly $140 million to buy the planes, funding that comes from a massive budget increase through the Two Beautiful Bidets Act. Might these be the planes that they bought from Spirit Airlines that had no engines? I can't recall. Jillian continues, though. There's more. Last month, I tossed my own contribution into the ring. I think this is what we were reading. With this story going through all of DHS's recent aircraft purchases. It's not just one F-jet, folks. And Walters Shell Company connections to most of them. That is kind of amazing. And remember, I do recall this comment that she made last time she was passing this information along, that Walters was now making his fortune in brokering the purchase of aircraft, but he wasn't an aviation business person. He was a doctor who, went on these amazing heroic adventures around the world or other by flying to them on airplanes. He had experience chartering aircraft, but brokering aircraft was just something he found, well, I guess if I do it through Corey Lewandowski, I can make a profit at it. It's very interesting. And so a very long chain here. There's more. Jillian now says, then Dan and Nick, the other reporters, with Project on Government Oversight and Mother Jones, followed up with this story, revealing Walters had donated to a gnome-aligned PAC in 2024, and the $1 billion contract to assist with self-deportations had resulted in only 917 voluntary departures. So $1 billion to get under 1,000 people to buy into this nonsense. That brings us to today's NBC News piece, the one I guess we were looking at. Our first look at how the much hinted at corruption may have actually gone down, plus linking it to the marketing scandal. I'm certain there's much more to come on Walters, but not from me. I cover ICE flights. Follow Nick and Dan instead. So I guess we'll take that advice and keep that in mind. So big storyline. This is go to the prediction markets, everybody. You can now make a bet on whether or not the through lines that Jillian is drawing between the rather scandalous $220 million PR budget that they were using to shoot commercials of Kristi Noem that might all have gone for naught at this point, and skimming off of the top of those contracts and private prison contracts and plane purchase contracts, whether whether all of it went into Corey Lewandowski's pocket or whether some of it went into someone else's pocket, and how many times did this weirdo doctor, who I guess just found it that much more lucrative to turn into a right-wing propaganda machine and fraudster than he ever got being a heroic globe-trotting doctor saving American lives everywhere he went. That seems like a more fulfilling avocation, but I suppose if you're looking to fill up the retirement account and then knock off for the rest of your days, a faster way to do it is through Republican grift. That's always going to be the case, unfortunately. But there you have it. To turn back to some other housekeeping news before we exit for the day. I know I'd really like to dig into some of this stuff, but this I think will take a couple hours to read through all the things that Jillian has threaded together. I'm going to give you a link to the thread, and from the thread, you'll be able to find all the different stories that she's pointing to as important way stations along the lines of the story. One housekeeping, like actual internal housekeeping note. Yesterday, or a day before, I guess, I called out in thanks to Chris Cammers, who I had said was a new subscriber via Patreon. And it occurred to me, I was like, well, that's a familiar name. And then I saw like the little avatar that went with him. And I think it's like Ming the Merciless. Is that what you're using there? Do I remember this correctly? But Chris this made me look it up. And Chris has actually been a long time supporter via Patreon and is not new per se, but has in fact decided to up his contribution to another level, which we very much appreciate. It's a great source of additional support, and I appreciate it. I feel bad sometimes asking people who have been supporting us for a long time to do even more, although it's a very nice testament, certainly, I must say, and nothing makes me happier than to find out that people in reevaluating how important we are to their day will double down on things like this. But Chris, anyway, has been a supporter since October of 2020, if my email isn't lying to me. And this latest boost is what came through. It says it comes through as a new member, but it's not new. It's just new level at which you're a member. And so I just wanted to make sure that Chris got all that credit that he was due for his longtime support. I definitely appreciate it. I was very saddened to see somebody who I don't know or follow, but just sad to see somebody commenting, I've never been poorly served, whatever, on Blue Sky, by my assumption that there just are no good political streamers. And I don't know whether that's supposed to be separate from podcasters or not. And I was saddened to see that there were some people who follow me on Blue Sky who were liking that comment. I don't know if they're subscribers to the show, but I think we do a pretty good job. I didn't want to see that happen. And, one thing will pick you up more than anything is finding out that, hey, there are people who actually disagree with that comment. And this is a good stream. We do a good job. I appreciate myself. But more than that, I appreciate you appreciating us. So, all right. That having been cleared up, I do have one other piece of housekeeping to take care of. I read you yesterday, and I think we did the best I could with under the circumstances. I read, instead of reading you the story of focusing on Cesar Chavez and his wrongdoing, I instead chose to read you the article that focused on Dolores Huerta and her story. But I had mentioned to you that there was a direct comment issued from her office, and I couldn't find it right away. And it's here on Medium, and we'll close out the week by reading it to you. It's not that long. Today, and that was on March 18th, civil rights leader Dolores Huerta issued the following statement, and it goes like this. I am nearly 96 years old. And for the last 60 years, I have kept the secret because I believed that exposing the truth would hurt the farm worker movement I had spent my entire life fighting for. I have encouraged people to always use their voice. Following the New York Times' multi-year investigation into sexual misconduct by Cesar Chavez, I can no longer stay silent, and I must share my own experiences. As a young mother in the 1960s, I experienced two separate sexual encounters with Cesar. The first I was manipulated and pressured into having sex with him, and I didn't feel I could say no because he was someone that I admired, my boss, and the leader of the movement that I had already devoted years of my life to. The second time, I was forced against my will and in an environment where I felt trapped. I had experienced abuse and sexual violence before, and I convinced myself these were incidents that I had to endure alone and in secret. Both sexual encounters with Cesar led to pregnancies. I chose to keep my pregnancies secret, and after the children were born, I arranged for them to be raised by other families that could give them stable lives. Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to develop a deep relationship with these children who are now close to my other children, their siblings, but even then, no one knew the full truth about how they were conceived until just a few weeks ago. I carried this secret for as long as I did because building the movement and securing farm worker rights was my life's work. The formation of a union was the only vehicle to accomplish and secure those rights, and I wasn't going to let Cesar or anyone else get in the way. I channeled everything I had into advocating on behalf of millions of farm workers and others who were suffering and deserved equal rights. I have never identified myself as a victim, but I now understand that I am a survivor of violence, of sexual abuse, of domineering men who saw me and other women as property or things to control. I am telling my story because the New York Times has indicated that I was not the only one. There were others. Women are coming forward, sharing that they were sexually abused and assaulted by Cesar when they were girls and teenagers. The knowledge that he hurt young girls sickens me. My heart aches for everyone who suffered alone and in silence for years. There are no words strong enough to condemn those deplorable actions that he did. Cesar's actions do not reflect the values of our community and of our movement. There is more, of course. It deserves a full reading. I shouldn't have waited this long, but I wanted to bring it to your attention and let you know where you could find it.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
We'll have to end it with her declaration at the end. I have kept this secret long enough. My silence ends here. It's hard to imagine Dolores Huerta in silence about anything, but about this she was. What a painful chapter that is. Time next, though, for Justice Putnam to pick up the ball and run with it for his Friday report. Let's just end it that way. We'll see you on Monday.